We're going to jump right into this panel here of some fire experts and talk a little bit about where we go from here. All right. Okay. So we have Ben Wilson. He's an attorney from Jackson, Mississippi, one of my law partners. I'm also the godfather of his son. So we have Bobby Schall, a former ATF, alcohol, tobacco, firearms investigator, fire cause and origin investigator from New Orleans. And then another friend of mine, Dr. Ray Franco, an electrical engineer and a certified fire investigator from Vicksburg, Mississippi. So let's get right to it. I will start with Bobby Schall in the middle here, because you were with the government, the federal government. And you can use this. Tell us, in your experience as a federal investigator for cause and origin, what are the investigators looking for now, and how will they do a cause and origin in this wildfire type environment?
In this situation, the first thing they're going to try and do is look at all of the fires separately, identify what caused the fire, what brought the heat source, the fuel, and the oxygen together in the right circumstances to cause a fire. They're going to look at them individually, see how they progressed, and then as they say one fire caused another fire, they'll start collapsing them down. Now, the public sector obviously has public safety as their primary responsibility. So they're going to look first, if it was an intentional fire, they want to hold somebody accountable and protect the community from further aggravation and damage. If it is something else, then they want to hold that item, that product, that whatever responsible, and either change legislation, change product manufacturing, change protocols, so we don't have these types of situations in the future. It's a long, drawn-out process when you have a conflagration like this that's affected so many people, affected such a broad area. And then after the public sector takes a look at it, that's when private interests, your insurance company investigators, investigators for utilities and other products, companies in the area, they will all have their fire investigators come in and look at it from their perspective and their interest.
Okay. And as far as potential companies with liability, or what are you thinking at this point from what you've seen?
Well, certainly in this area, you would have utilities that run through there, gas companies, electrical companies. You would have construction firms that are out there felling trees or building roads, or railroads certainly is something you'd want to look at. You would look at weather, see if that was a contributing factor to ignition. Certainly, from what I've read and understand, it was a contributing factor to spread. So you would look at all of those entities and figure out what role they played in the event, and then figure out how that plays out down the line.
Okay. Dr. Franco, how you doing?
Doing fine.
You barely made it here, didn't you?
I just did.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Tell us, how does something like this happen? How do we get to this point with a fire and that spreads like this, a wildfire? If you can comment on that for us.
Well, I'm here primarily to look at the electrical aspects of this fire. And I think about 6 months ago, the state of California fined Pacific Gas and Electric $8.3 million for not maintaining their lines properly in another wildfire. Now, we don't have any evidence, yet that they're actually the cause of this fire, but the fire occurred at night. The fires originated in an urban area. You had high winds, 50 to 80 miles an hour, and from what I've read, the first 10 or early 911 calls, said there were arcing and sparking of the power lines. So the comment from one of the articles I read, the deputy director of Cal Fire said, would want to look and see whether there's been negligence or a violation of law. And it's too early to tell that because we haven't got our feet on the ground and we haven't got in those areas yet, but that's what we want to be looking at.
Okay. Ben, you've done a lot of fire cases, a lot of litigation, a lot of explosions. What are you looking at? What do you expect defenses to be, and what kind of issues in this case?
Thanks, Rock. Probably the biggest issue that I come across from a litigation standpoint, and it's something that you are going to, and you're going through it right now. It is the built-in time defense. There is lots of time. This is not going to be quick. And it certainly appears that this is going to be an issue that is litigated. Now, Rocky and I, some of our other partners, we unfortunately have had this experience from the disasters in our area, personally affected. From Katrina to BP, we recently dealt with some Gatlinburg, Tennessee fires. But you have multiple aspects. You have 3 different types of cases to look at right now, and it's all the information will come available. But you have whether or not this is criminal, whether or not it is a negligence case or a product defect case, or whether or not this is an act of God. The act of God defense is going to be very, very prevalent here. If not that, then this person caused it, or this particular company was more at fault. But time is definitely the issue. There's tons of evidence that that we can't get just yet. And as time passes, things get misplaced or things disappear, physical evidence.
That leads me to my question is, we've talked about what the people in the audience can do immediately for their homes, what they can do immediately health-wise. What evidence-wise do fire investigators and fire attorneys need from people in the audience to help prove the case, not just for them, but for everybody?
Well, there's just real quick, and I'll let the experts get into it. One, experts are going to be very important here, and they've got to be trusted. 2, the management of information is going to be huge. Every single person in here has a phone. Every single person takes that phone out and takes pictures, takes videos. The amount of photos and videos that will come out and being able to analyze those and break them down and keeping all of that managed, very important. So if you have that type of stuff, keep it. Hopefully you can upload it to the cloud and hold on to it, because it will be relevant, I assure you. It's going to be relevant whether it's from the property side and your damages claim, or for a liability aspect. But
Bobby, what do you think?
Yeah,
what kind
I
of
would
evidence?
agree with that. Videos, photographs, eyewitness accounts, all of that is critical to the investigation. In something like this where it's scattered all over, it's very hard for us to go to each individual person and find it. So, some community effort to centralize it would be great, to make it available. Getting access to the public sector material when it becomes available is certainly critical. And your thoughts, observations, and information is critical. And like Rocky and Ben, I was in Katrina. I was in Louisiana during Katrina. And you'll find that when you go through a stressful situation, you don't always remember things clearly immediately. So what I would recommend is write down your recollections in a journal. And maybe 2-3 months down the line, something that you didn't remember will pop into your head. Write it down, document it, so when somebody does start asking you these questions, you have something that can help prompt your memory and bring back the best information available that will help the investigators. This is going to be a long haul, but the sooner that investigators get information, the sooner they can start analyzing it, the sooner they can start plugging the pieces into the puzzle. And just like the old game concentration, even when you don't see all of the pieces of the puzzle, sooner or later you can get the whole picture. So your little piece of the puzzle is very important. So I would encourage you to preserve it and document it as best you possibly can.
Some of the best evidence, we keep talking about Katrina, but we all had experience there, at least in this panel, was from storm chasers. Because the big issue in Katrina insurance litigation was whether it was a wind-driven damage to your house and knocked it off the slab, because then it would be covered, or if it was water that was pushed with storm surge and it was a flood and it wasn't covered. And some of those early videos were used by hundreds, if not thousands, of claimants. And so the earlier the video you have of the fire or of the progression, I think the more important it is generally. Ray, you want to talk about what evidence from an electrical standpoint you're looking at in this matter, if you can do that?
Well, from an electrical standpoint, the first thing they have to do is, define the area of origin. And we go in there and just, look, were power lines down? Why were they down? Did the trees fall on them? Did we have the right clearance? One of the things that struck me when I first started doing research on this fire was the fact that California only requires 4 feet of clearance from the power lines. I do a lot of work between Houston and Atlanta, and everybody, all the utility companies between those areas trim their power lines between 10 and 15 feet. I sat next to somebody from Texas on the plane today, and he asked me why I was going out here, and I told him, and he said, well, there was a power line going through his property. And he said the utility company has a 50-foot right-of-way on both sides of that power line in order to cut trees. Now, I think 50 feet, is probably too much, but, 4 feet may not be enough. And one of the things that, you might think about writing down in addition to these other problems, when was the last time you saw the utility company trimming trees? Were they trimming? Yeah. How close were these lines, to the power lines? If a tree falls, if it's higher than the line, is it possible they could fall on that line? But generally, if a large limb or tree falls on a power line, it'll bring down the poles on both sides of it. And there should be protective devices if it does bring down that pole. You should have circuit breakers, oil circuit reclosers, and fuses that should de-energize that line and make it safe. And did those work after, the tree fell and knocked the line down, or was it still alive and it caught vegetation on fire?
Okay. There was a question, and there's a mic there if you don't mind using that, ma'am.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm just curious, has there ever been any discussion in the county of Sonoma to build all of these wires, all of these electric lines underground? Because Los Gatos, wonderful little town, where are the wires? Underground. Why has this never been done? That's my question.
That's a good question, because when we were driving through there today, we saw wires still through trees. Today, I don't see, it could happen again tonight. And so I don't have a great answer to your question, but that would be my gut reaction. Do we have another question, sir?
Yes, sir. One of the considerations for all of us is if we had adequate insurance. And I see the indications up there of FireLawsuit.com and ClassAction.com. If we have insurance that does cover our actual losses, should we still be pursuing interest in some of these other claims? I think that's very important.
Yeah, that's a good question, and you're really talking about 2 types of claims: a first-party claim against, say, your insurance company for your contents versus a third-party claim against a utility company, a manufacturing company, a product manufacturer. And it's going to depend, I think, on the individual, and are you made whole?
If you're made whole,
then you may not need to file a claim. Okay. But let's say you only had $200,000 in insurance and your house is worth $500,000. Who's going to foot the bill for the other $300,000? It's going to be you.
I understand that, but I'm
Okay.
saying, should we still be interested if there's a lot of property owners who do have adequate coverage, but still, if PG&E or somebody else is liable, are there additional damages for what we've been through?
Well, there's pain, absolutely. There's pain and suffering. There's mental and emotional claims. The doctor talked about exposure to these chemicals.
Right.
So I believe there are additional claims that should be pursued, yes.
Thank
Just
you,
real
sir.
quick,
Thank you.
I'm just going to add, there is nothing wrong with going to your insurance company, doing this. and getting an offer, and then calling. You have nothing to lose to call and see if there's something that we can do in addition on top of that. Because
true.
there are specialists that deal with this every single day, all day, and they're going to know things, just the minor details and things. So if work with them. I hope that it's not like Katrina. It's not like BP. I hope it's not.
But if we resolve our claims with our own companies, do we have to assign to them the rights? They may want to go after PG&E.
There will
They may
be
subrogate.
subrogation.
It's
Yeah,
possible.
I'm concerned about that
But
as
Charles
well.
can address that issue afterwards.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you for your time. We got 1 minute, Bobby, and then 1 minute, Ray, and then we got to close because we're going to get to Mr. Kennedy next. I'm
Was
sorry.
there a question
Did we have a
there?
question? I didn't mean to skip you.
I just have
Go
a
ahead.
quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as you guys' opinion, I've heard that a couple in Fountain Grove has already filed a lawsuit against PG&E over the fire. Do any of you have any comments or just personal opinion of what you think the basis or anything that could involve the rest of us as far as that lost our homes? Since that
Right
was
now,
already filed?
yeah. Thank you for your question. Personally, in my opinion, this is going to be a situation of race to the courthouse for, a lot of lawyers. It's going to be who can get there, who can file something. In my opinion, it's early. I mean, there's so much information that we don't know. And we want to be able to approach this and be credible with any allegations or any claims that are made. So that's my personal opinion.
All right, Bobby.
And I just want to close with one thing. I know everybody here has a financial interest in their house being made whole, but you also want your community to come back. And like the lady mentioned, I have no direct knowledge on why they don't put the lines underground or whatever. But from a public perspective, that is the purpose of a comprehensive investigation, to understand the factors that led to this event. And are there ways that we can control or mitigate it? Can we increase the clearance on the trees? Is that good enough? Do we need to put it underground? The urban wildland interface has been a big issue for years. And everybody wants to live closer and closer and closer to the trees and nature. But there comes a breaking point where we have to manage safety and kind of not put people and our property at risk. So those are the types of things that as an origin and cause investigator, we want to look at what caused it, how the fire progressed, how we can mitigate it in the future. I'm really, really, really sorry for what you all have went through, and just like the condolences that they mentioned earlier, I empathize with you. I mean, I've been through Katrina. I've seen how it affects people. It affects the community. The anniversary brings back all this rush of bad memories, and you have to, like the doctor said, take the steps to prepare yourself. There's no weakness in asking for help. When I was with ATF, I was having housing issues because of the damage. 2, our office was lost. But hugs, as little as it was, hugging my agents every day, kind of help them mentally get through it. And you're going to have to rely on each other to get through it. And I hope that through the investigative process, we can not only help you individually with personal losses, but we can help the community rebuild and rise from the ashes, so to speak.
Thank you, Bobby. All right. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious of why the fire was as hot as it was. Because you're talking about melting glass, you're talking about the tires and the aluminum, and right next to that, all the trees are just fine, or the shrubs just a foot away from something that completely burned. Plastic.
We saw a green patch of grass in the middle of a car lot that was gone.
Next to something that, and the other thing I just want to state is, after the fire in Middletown and 2 years ago that they had, there was he was a meteorologist with the Air Force, and then he was 28 years as a biologist in Fish and Game here in California, and he tested the lichen in the trees and found astronomical readings
Well, there are,
Thank you.
there are studies and documentation on the burning rate and energy produced by what I'd call legacy homes, like when we were coming up and now. There's a lot more synthetic materials, polyethylene, plastics that give off more energy, burn more vigorously in houses. So the speed of fire progression in a house is a lot different than it used to be. It used to be a room may take 20 minutes to flash over when you had cotton batting in your furnishings, hardwood framing, stuff like that. Now you can flash over or get a room totally involved in 2.5, 3 minutes. Some of these other factors, I think that's the investigator would have to look at on what role they played or didn't play in it. As far as why something burns and something doesn't burn, there's a lot of mechanisms of heat transfer going on in a fire. You have conduction, radiation, convection. They're affected by barriers. There could be something protecting it. If I have energy coming towards the lectern here, it's going to char this side, but something on the other side is not going to be damaged. So a plastic garbage can, even as fragile as it is, isn't going to be impacted by the heat the same way. So there's the factors that the fire investigators will look at to see why things were damaged and things weren't damaged. Wildfires are very unique. They create their own weather. The winds can affect it a certain way. So the fire investigator will have to look at the mechanisms of heat transfer and why artifacts look the way they look.
Okay, I hate to cut you off, but we got to end it so we can get to Mr. Kennedy. We've got one more speaker, and we're going to go right to it, and then we'll be done. Okay, give us just a minute.
Thank y'all.
Good job, guys.